This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Xenagos God of Revels EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Today it's time to update Big Daddy X. That's right, baby. Xenagos God of Revels is making an appearance on the Up and Up series. We've got 4 cards going in. That means 4 cards are coming out. But before we start making those swaps, let me take a moment to remind you that in the comment section, in the description of this video, not the comment section, in the description of this video, you will find links to this build's deck tech, the up to the second deck list, and Xenagos' video primer series. All right, 4 cards in, 4 cards coming out, and the first one going into the 99 today, it is Trumpeting Carnosaur. All right, here we go. Come on, camera, get in the game, baby. There we go. All right, we have a 7/6 Trampler, so already Xenagos is in love. We've got the Evasion of Trample and a great big beefy body. Note that this is only for 4 and 2 red mana. When Trumpeting Carnosaur enters the battlefield, we discover 5. Now that is a very, very potent ability here because it doesn't say when you cast the spell. We have so many ways to cheat our biggins into play. So if it were a cast trigger, Trumpeting Carnosaur would not be going into the 99 of this build. But since it only has to enter the battlefield to discover 5, oh baby, we are going to find a place for this every day of the week and twice during Friday Night Magic. And that Discover 5 ability means we exile cards from the top of our library until we find a non-land card with mana value 5 or less, and then we cast it for free. And then we put those exile cards on the bottom of our library. Yeah, a free spell for just getting this into play. Remember, we don't have to cast this. We could sneak attack it in for 1 red mana. We can get it into play with Quicksilver Amulet. This is just a ridiculous card. And then if Xenagos is on our side of the battlefield too, it's a 7/6. Minimally, we're sending a 14/12. No, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We're sending a 14/13 with Trample and Haste into combat with a free spell just by having this enter the battlefield. An amazing, amazing addition to Xenagos decks everywhere. And if we needed to, we can always pay 2 in a red mana and discard this from our hand to have it deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. That is not a bad ability here because, let's face it, there are a lot of utility commanders out there that could be quite a nuisance on the battlefield. So if we have to discard this for just 3 mana and deal 3 damage to that commander and send it to the command zone, I think Xenagos would approve, as long as we make sure that we can get it into play if we don't need to use it for the removal. All right, so Trumpeting Carnosaur is in. Coming out is Ghalta. All right, now this is where we start to draw the fine lines when it comes to evolving this Xenagos build, particularly when we're talking about a 12/12 mana where, let's face it, we could eventually cast this for just 2 green mana. It has 10 and 2 green as its mana value, but Ghalta costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures we control. And we've got biggins in this deck, so it's not difficult to cast Ghalta for just 2 green mana. A 12/12 Trampler that can hit the field, and with Xenagos' combat ability, it's a 24/24 hasty Trampler into combat. This is where, like I said, the fine lines need to come in. The fine lines are drawn, and we need to have conversations about reconciling what are the best creatures for this build. This is a big old beefy boy, there's no question about it, but that's all it is. It does nothing else. The Carnosaur over there gives us a free spell from the top of our library, and it has that potential ability to lightning bolt a creature or send 3 to a planeswalker. This is just a big old trample-y biggin. That's all it is. No other abilities. So as more and more creatures that have the big beefy bodies and the evasion that Trumpeting Carnosaur has, and then if it has additional abilities like the Discover ability and that potential direct damage, it's just making it more difficult to keep Ghalta and creatures like that in the 99 because all they do is attack, which is what we want to do. But if we can staple some additional abilities, some utilitarian or some utility benefits, that's only going to make this deck that much more difficult to play against. So, Galta, you're out. Trumpeting Carnosaur, you are in. Card number 2 going into the 99 today, and that is Monstrous Vortex. All right, now, so this one is I'm gonna keep a watchful eye when this card is out in play for us. Because as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Trumpeting Carnosaur, we have a lot of ways to cheat creatures into play. And this is an enchantment that has a cast trigger. So we have to be sure that whenever we're casting these creatures, I'm sorry, let me say that again. We have to make sure that when we're getting creatures into play, how many times are we casting them versus just cheating them into play? Is having Monstrous Vortex in the deck worth it? Does it give us enough benefits for the creatures that we are casting, noting that Xenagos would trigger this coming out of the command zone? So let's see what this does. Whenever we cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, we discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. So each time we cast one of our biggins, or Xenagos, which is a biggin, of course, we are going to discover X, which means we're going to get that extra free spell. And that's going to be, because we have so many biggins in this deck and so many ways to cheat them into play, I'm unsure how valuable Monstrous Vortex is going to be. So we're going to throw it into the 99. We're going to give it a whirl and see. And if for some reason it's not living up to its viability and potential, then it will be back here in another episode of the Up and Up series, and we will find a card to replace it that will better suit what we're doing here. So on a trial basis, Monstrous Vortex is in. That card's going in, and it is going to replace Selvala Stampede. Now, back in the day, this card was the absolute finisher of so many green decks. This was one of the decks as well. It's sorcery, 4 and 2 green, the Council's Dilemma, which means starting with you. Each player votes for wild or free. We reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature card for each wild vote. We put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle the rest into our library. And then we may put a permanent card from our hand onto the battlefield for each free vote. What's happening with me casting this spell so many times over and over, every single choice from my opponents is free. Now, even if I don't have anything in my hand, they're picking my hand clean, which in some ways could be a good thing if I have those biggins or some permanents to put into play, but if I don't, then I just wasted some votes. Now, the 6 mana to reveal a creature from the top of our library and get that into play just for us, that's pretty good. But I think we can do better, because I think we can get more action if we are to have Monstrous Vortex on our side of the battlefield and its reusability. Again, this is what we have to figure out. If we miss the Selvala Stampede more, or if we can get some more benefits from Monstrous Vortex. We're going to give that enchantment a whirl. I like the fact that it could be used multiple times, because it's whenever we cast a spell that's power 5 whenever we cast a creature spell that's power 5 or greater. It's not just once a turn. We could do it multiple times. We are in Gruul color, so we could ramp out a ridiculous amount of mana. This one is on a trial-by-trial basis. We're going to see if Monstrous Vortex can do better than Selvala Stampede. Fingers crossed, we're going to see. All right, MTGBC. Card number 3 going into this build. It is Morog, Fury of Akoum. All right, here we're looking for another game ender. We have a 6/6 legendary Minotaur Warrior for 4 and 2 red mana, and each creature we control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. And it has a landfall ability that whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, if it's our main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, we untap all creatures we control. So with Morog on our side of the battlefield and a biggin or 2, we can play a land, get an additional combat. Those creatures are going to get +1/+0, +1/+0. Xenagos is going to trigger an additional time with that extra combat. Morog is a way in which for us to finish the game that much more quickly. With Morog going into the 99 with its extra combat ability, we're taking out Giant Ediphage. Here was a 7/7 trampling insect for 5 and 2 green mana, and whenever it dealt combat damage to a player, we created a token that was a copy of Giant Ediphage. We just have to strike we just have to hit an opponent with this, which is not bad, which is not, jeez, let me see. Which is not difficult to do, particularly if Xenagos is buffing it by +7/+7. We get another Trampler on our side. Yeah, it's another 7/7, but it's just another biggin. It sits on the battlefield as we wait and keep our fingers crossed to untap with all of our creatures on our side of the battlefield. Well, let's see. Would we rather have Giant Ediphage's token creating ability, or do we want Morog's ability with its landfall trigger to give us an additional combat in a deck that wants to attack and potentially one-shot an opponent? I think we want Morog with a slight discount on the mana value to replace Giant Ediphage. Giant Ediphage does help to does help to create those tokens for our side of the battlefield, but Morog helps us to close out the game. All right, the last card going in today, MTG BC, card number 4 of our Xenagos build. It is Evercoat Ursine. All right, here we go. We have a 6/5 trampling elemental bear for 4 and 1 green mana. It has Hideaway 3, Hideaway 3. So that's 2 Hideaway triggers. So let's follow this for a second. When Evercoat Ursine would to enter the battlefield, we look at the top 3 cards of our library, and then we exile 1 face down, and then we do that again. Note, it just has to come into play. Again, similar to what we were talking about with the Trumpeting Carnosaur, this is not a cast trigger. We just need the Evercoat Ursine to come into play, so we could cheat it into play, hit its Hideaway 3, have those 2 exiled cards tucked away. And whenever Evercoat Ursine deals combat damage to a player, and let's face it, a 6/5 Trampler that can get a +6/+6 buff and haste from Xenagos, it's going to happen. And when it does, if there are any cards exiled with Evercoat Ursine, we may play one of them without paying its mana cost. So here we're getting 2 free spells, and it doesn't even matter what the mana cost is. If you look at what we're doing here, with so many of the cards we're putting in here outside of our game ender with Morog, we're adding cards that have abilities that help us to get more resources, that help us to make our side of the battlefield become stronger, become more enhanced. Evercoat Ursine is going to do that, just like I think Monstrous Vortex will, and just like I know Trumpeting Carnosaur will. These are all cards that are going in that's going to just help us win the game quicker with more spells ability, more card advantage, and just overall more power. With this Elemental Bear going into the 99, it is going to replace Rampaging War Mammoth. Now here we had another Trampling Biggin. This one's a 9/7, 5 and 2 red, although we could cycle it for X, 2 and a red, and if we were to do that, we destroy up to X target artifacts. Haven't once ever cycled this, and then we would draw a card, of course. I've never cycled this once. I've only ever gotten this onto the battlefield. But again, it's a 9/7 that if Xenagos hits, it becomes an 18/15 with Trample and Haste, but it doesn't do anything else. We can't even use the Artifact Destruction ability when it comes into play. Evercoat Ursine is going to do so much more for us than Rampaging Baloth, and we're only missing an overall 3 points from the power. We're dropping from 9 to 6, but in this deck, it's not going to matter, and it won't be missed. All right, there we have it, MTG BC. 4 cards, all of which seem very, very powerful in a Xenagos deck outside of the Monstrous Vortex, which we're going to workshop going into the 99. You let me know your thoughts about these additions in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.